How I lost my wife and feelings but became the owner of a huge estate. That's the tale I'll tell you now. A story that started with a single, quiet moment I can still see clear as day. It unfolded on a Wednesday, late summer, when the air in our old American manor hung still, thick with secrets I hadn't yet traced. I built myself from nothing, born to a rented room, hands calloused by years of hauling freight. I climbed into a logistics empire through nights that blurred into mornings. Reserved, deliberate, that's who I was, a man who weighed every step, every word, letting silence do the heavy lifting. 7 years back, I married Celeste, sharp-edged, spoiled, a woman carved from wealth I'd only read about. She brought the estate into our marriage, a sprawling, luxurious relic of her family's past, stone walls rising from the earth, gardens stretching wide, a library I claimed as my own. We lived there, restrained, aristocratic, her commanding its halls, me counting its costs. Passion never defined us, distance did, a cool space I'd grown used to. I thought it held, until that day, when a crack split it open, small but deep, and the life I'd shaped began to shift. The estate wasn't mine, not at first. Celeste called it her birthright, a gift from her late father, handed to her just months after we'd signed our names to a marriage contract I barely glanced at. I trusted her then, her voice firm, her eyes daring me to question. She loved it, its old grandeur, its weight, while I saw it as a machine, a thing to maintain, its pipes groaning, its roofs leaking, my money patching what her family had let decay. We'd settled into our corners, she, the queen of her domain, barking orders at staff, her tone cutting when I didn't jump. Me, the quiet engine, funding her whims, keeping the books balanced. Hints were there, looking back, her late walks through the garden, her glances that lingered elsewhere, her silences when I'd ask about her day. I'd let them slide. Reserved men don't dig, don't chase what's not offered. I'd build a life steady, contained, and she'd fit into it, or so I'd told myself. The staff came with the place, cooks, maids, a gardener named Marcus I'd barely registered. He'd been there before me, hired years back, or so I assumed, by her father's people. Tall, rough around the edges, always in the green, pruning hedges, hauling dirt. I didn't think much of him, just another pair of hands keeping the estate alive. Celeste ran them all, snapped at the cook for slow meals, sent maids scurrying with curt waves. Marcus, though, she'd mention him offhand. Casual, he's planting roses today, or he fixed the fountain. I'd nod, move on. Reserved men don't dwell. Our marriage wasn't loud, restrained, yes, aristocratic in its coolness. I worked, she spent, days apart, nights polite. I thought it worked, 7 years of it, a rhythm I'd accepted. Until that Wednesday, when it all tilted sideways. I'd been in the library that afternoon, my space, its tall shelves a shield against her sharp edges, papers spread across the desk, contracts I'd been poring over for hours. The estate's hum was faint, distant clatter from the kitchen, a lawnmower's drone beyond the walls. Celeste had left earlier, said she was off to town, some errand about roses for the East Wing planters. Back by 4, she'd tossed over her shoulder, her tone clipped, impatient. I nodded, let her go, glad for the quiet, the chance to sink into numbers without her demands. I stood, rolled my shoulders, stepped to the window, its glass cool, overlooking the garden, her pride, acres of trimmed rows, fountains, paths winding out of sight. That's when I saw it, her car, parked by the greenhouse, had still, like it had never moved. She hadn't gone to town. My brow creased, not alarmed, not yet, just curious, a faint tug at the edge of my calm. I turned back to the desk, papers waiting, numbers calling, then stopped. A sound drifted up, soft, carried on the evening air, her laugh, light, unguarded, a sound I hadn't heard in years. I leaned closer, pressed my hand to the pane, looked again. There, near the garden's far edge, Celeste, hair loose, standing close to Marcus. Too close. His hand brushed her arm, quick, intentional, and she didn't step back, just smiled, head tilting in a way I remembered from early days, when she'd wanted my attention, my yes. My chest tightened, not sudden, not loud, just a slow, steady grip, like a rope pulling taut. I watched, seconds stretching, maybe minutes, saw her nod, saw him gesture toward the roses, saw them turn together, walking deeper into the rows, out of sight. The library fell silent, papers untouched, air heavy. She hadn't gone to town, she'd lied. Casual, small, and Marcus wasn't just tending plants. Something was there, something I'd overlooked, something weaving through the estate's quiet corners. I didn't rush out, didn't call her name, didn't pound the glass. Just stood, letting it settle, a crack widening in the life I'd known, in the marriage I thought steady. Reserved men don't leap, they watch, they wait. I'd built this, 7 years of US, of her, of me, and now I saw the edges fraying. That laugh, that touch, they weren't mine, weren't ours. I stepped back, slow, deliberate, sat at the desk again, hands flat on the wood. The estate loomed around me, hers, she'd said, but something shifted that day. That's when it began, when I started to see, to question, to pull the thread she'd buried. I turned from the glass, slow, deliberate, returned to my desk, papers untouched, and sat. The estate hummed around me, distant clinks from the kitchen, a breeze through the halls, but my mind stayed on her, on him, on what I'd seen. She came in late, past 8, her heels clicking sharp on the foyer tiles, her voice calling up about dinner, casual, like nothing had shifted. I stayed in the library, didn't answer, didn't go down, just listened as she moved through the house, ordering the cook, rattling off plans for the East Wing roses. Roses. The same excuse she'd used to leave, the same spot I'd seen her with Marcus. I waited, let her climb the stairs, let her pass the library door without stopping. She didn't look in, didn't call again, just went to her room, the click of her lock a faint echo. I stood then quiet, measured, stepped into the hall, past her door, down to my study on the West Wing. Reserved men don't pry, not openly, but they watch, and I'd started watching her. The next morning, I tested her calm, subtle. Breakfast came, coffee, toast, her sitting across the long table, flipping through a catalog of garden sculptures. How was town? I asked, voice even, eyes on my cup. She didn't pause, just shrugged, turned a page. Fine, got what I needed. Roses are ordered. Her tone was flat, bored, too smooth, too quick. I nodded, didn't push, watched her sip her tea, her fingers steady, her gaze elsewhere. Fine. I stood, left the table, left her there, went back to the library, papers waiting, but my hands didn't reach for them. Her car hadn't moved, she hadn't gone. And that laugh, that touch with Marcus, sat heavy in me, a weight I couldn't shake. I needed more, not guesses, not glimpses, something solid, something she couldn't dismiss. Days passed, Thursday, Friday, a weekend of her flitting through the estate, me in my corners, watching closer now. She'd linger in the garden, longer than before, her voice drifting up, sharp with Marcus about pruning, soft when she thought no one heard. I didn't follow, didn't stand at windows like a fool, just listened, noted, stored it away. Monday came quiet, routine, until I found it. I'd gone to the study, needed a file from the cabinet, old tax records for the estate's upkeep. The drawer stuck, always did, until I yanked it free, paper spilling. There, among the mess, a letter, folded, worn at the edges, not mine. Her handwriting, Celeste's, slanted, sure, addressed to Marcus. No date, no envelope, just her words, plain on the page. I opened it, slow, steady, sat at the desk, the estate silent around me. Marcus, it began. You know I chose you for this, years ago, before him. Keep it quiet, keep it ours. The roses are yours too. My eyes lingered, read it again, then once more. Before him, before me. She'd picked him, long ago, not chance, not recent, brought him here, planted him in the garden, in our life. The roses, her excuse, her pride, were his, a thread tying them past my 7 years. My chest didn't pound, just tightened, a slow coil I couldn't loosen. I folded it, tucked it in my pocket, not the drawer, stood, walked to the window. The garden sprawled below Marcus there, clipping hedges, her car parked nearby again. She wasn't in town, I hadn't been all week. I watched him tall, rough, moving easy through her roses, and saw it clear. Her silences, her walks, her lies, they weren't new, weren't slips. She'd woven him in, years back, kept him close, kept me blind. The letter wasn't passion, not wild, not loud, just a plan, a choice she'd made long before I'd signed the contract. I turned, left the study, letter burning in my pocket, went back to the library, sat, let it settle. Proof came Tuesday, subtle, final. I'd gone to the garage, needed a tool for a shelf, something mundane, past her car, door ajar. Inside, on the seat, a jacket, not hers, not mine. His Marcus's, worn denim, dirt-streaked, a match to what he'd worn by the roses. I didn't touch it, just looked, saw a note tucked in the pocket, her writing again, a scrap. Tonight, greenhouse. Tonight. I closed the door, soft, calm, walked back inside, jacket and note etched in me. That evening, I waited, library dark, window open, heard her steps, Saw her slip out toward the greenhouse, Marcus waiting. They didn't linger, just met, talked low, parted fast. Enough. I didn't follow, didn't need more. The letter, the jacket, her moves, they told it all. My reaction wasn't loud, reserved men don't roar. Shock first, sharp, cold, her betrayal a blade I hadn't seen. Then anger, slow, steady, not wild, just there, fueling me. Celeste, my wife, my partner, hadn't just strayed. She'd planned, chosen, kept Marcus here, a shadow in my house, my life. 7 years of restraint, of funding her world, and she'd built another, quiet, deliberate, with him. I didn't break, didn't shout, just stayed, letter in my pocket, jacket in my mind. The estate loomed, hers, she'd said, but now I saw it different. That's when I knew. I'd act, I'd turn it, I'd take what she'd hidden. Celeste didn't know I'd seen her slip into the greenhouse with Marcus that Tuesday night. Didn't know the letter in my pocket and the jacket in her car had peeled back her lies. I stayed in the library, window open, air cool, watching the shadows until she returned, her steps light, her face blank as she passed my door. The next morning, I didn't test her, didn't ask about town or roses, just moved through breakfast, silent, letting her chatter about curtains, letting her think I was still the man who'd nod and pay. I wasn't. By noon, I was ready to face her, to crack the aristocratic shell we'd lived in. She was in the East Wing parlor, sprawled on a chaise, flipping through garden catalogs, her voice sharp as she ordered a maid to fetch tea. I walked in, slow, deliberate, closed the door behind me, the click loud in the quiet. She glanced up, eyebrows lifting, then back to her pages, dismissive, like I was staff too. "Celeste," I said, voice low, steady, cutting through her rustling. She paused, looked again, saw my face, sat up, catalog slipping to the floor. "What's this about?" she asked, tone clipped, impatient. I didn't answer, just pulled the letter from my pocket, unfolded it, set it on the table between us. Her handwriting, her words to Marcus, stared up, undeniable. Her eyes flicked to it, widened, then narrowed, her lips parting, but no sound came yet. I stepped closer, hands loose, voice even. "I found this, your note to him. Chose you years ago before me. Explain that." Her face shifted, shock, then a flash of something harder, before she leaned back, crossing her arms. "You went through my things," she said, sharp, turning it on me. "That's what we're doing now, snooping." I didn't flinch, just watched her scramble. 7 years, I said, slow. "And you're asking about me? Tell me about Marcus, your gardener, your choice, before I signed your contract." Her jaw tightened. She stood, heels snapping against the wood, paced a step, then stopped, facing me. "It's not what you think," she started, fast, practiced. "That's old, years back, before you. I wrote it when I hired him, that's all." I nodded, slow, deliberate, pulled the jacket note from my pocket, dropped it beside the letter. "Tonight, greenhouse," I said, voice flat. "That's not old. That's yesterday." Her breath caught. She stared at the scrap, then me, her hands flexing, her calm cracking. "You're twisting this," she said, louder now, voice rising. "He's staff, nothing more. We talk, we plan the garden. That's it. You're making it ugly." I stepped forward, close, not touching, met her eyes, unblinking. "Talking doesn't leave jackets in your car, doesn't put you in the greenhouse at night, doesn't make you lie about town every day this week." Her face flushed, red, then pale, her lips trembling, but she didn't back down, just glared, defiant, spoiled. "It's not an affair," she snapped, hands on her hips. "Marcus, he's been here forever, understands me. This place, better than you ever will. You're cold, distant, buried in your papers. I needed someone, something alive." Alive. The word landed, sharp, heavy, but I didn't move, just let it sit. 7 years, I said, quieter now. "I kept this alive. Paid for your roses, your maids, your estate. And you chose him, before me, during me. Kept him here, under my roof." She laughed, short, bitter, tossed her hair back. "Your roof? This is mine, my family's, my world. You just live here, counting coins, missing everything. Marcus, he sees me, always has. Sees her." I took a breath, slow, controlled, let her words burn. "He sees you. I repeated, voice steady. And I don't. That's why you lied. Why you've been meeting him. Why you picked him years ago, planted him here, waited. Her eyes flashed. Anger, then something softer, faltering, her hands dropping. I didn't plan it, she said, quieter, scrambling again. It just happened. He's familiar, safe, not some grand scheme. You're blowing it up, making me the villain. Villain. I stepped back, hands in my pockets, looked at her, really looked. The spoiled queen, sharp, demanding, now shrinking, excuses piling like broken glass. You didn't just happen. You chose, long before me, every day since. Her mouth opened, closed, tears brimming, but she didn't cry, just stood, trembling, staring. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered, almost small. It's not love, not with him, just something I needed. We can fix this, you and me. Fix this. I shook my head slow, sure, turned to the door, paused. You fixed it already, I said, voice low, cutting. You and Marcus, you fixed it years ago. She called my name, once, sharp, then stopped, her voice breaking as I walked out, letter and note on the table, estate silent around me. I didn't shout, didn't smash, didn't let the anger spill wild. The confrontation burned, hot, deep, her excuses a flimsy shield against the truth I'd laid bare. As I moved to the library, door shut, air still as sat, hands flat, letting it settle. She wasn't just unfaithful, she'd rewritten us, made me nothing. That's when it turned, anger steady, a plan forming. The estate, hers, she'd said, wouldn't stay that way. I waited, let the night pass, let her think I'd simmer, retreat. She stayed in her room, door locked, lights off, while I pulled the contract from the study safe, its pages crisp, untouched since we'd signed. I read it, slow, deliberate, every clause, every line, until I found it, the infidelity term. Clear, stark property acquired during marriage, like this estate, defaulted to the faithful spouse if one strayed. She'd claimed it as hers, said it came from her father after our wedding, but the deed, the dates, told another story. Registered in her name 3 months into our union, jointly acquired, legally mine to claim if she broke faith. Marcus, her gardener, her choice, was the fracture, and I'd use it. Reserved men don't rush, they build, and I'd built this case, piece by piece, in the silence she'd left. Thursday morning, I acted calm, precise. Called my lawyer, James, a man I'd trusted with my company, laid it out, the letter, the jacket, her greenhouse meetings. Infidelity, I said, voice steady, handing over copies, her note to Marcus, proof of her lie. The estate's mine, she cheated, the contract holds. He nodded, flipped through the papers, confirmed it, said courts would back me. No question. I didn't stop there, pulled bank records, my payments for repairs, taxes, staff, 7 years of my money propping up her world. By noon, he drafted the claim quiet, legal, a blade she wouldn't see coming. I signed it, pin steady, sent it to her lawyer, a man she bragged about hiring for her whims. She'd know soon. No, I wasn't the shadow she'd cast me as. She was in the garden when it hit, Friday afternoon, her car parked by the roses again, Marcus nearby, oblivious. I watched from the library window, saw her phone ring, saw her answer, saw her face tighten as her lawyer's voice spilled out. She paced, fast, sharp, glanced at the house, at Marcus, then stormed inside, heels snapping up the stairs. I stayed put, door open, papers on my desk, waited as she burst in, eyes wild, papers clutched in her hand. What is this? She demanded, voice high, waving the claim, my name, her estate, the infidelity clause in black ink. I didn't stand, just looked up, calm, hands folded. It's the contract, I said, slow. You broke it, Marcus broke it. I'm taking what's mine. Her laugh came short, brittle, her hands shaking as she tossed the papers at me, scattering across the desk. Yours? She spat, leaning in, face close. This is my home, my family's my life. You can't steal it over some gardener. I didn't flinch, just gathered the pages, set them neat. You picked him, before me, during me, and the contract says it's mine now. Her eyes blazed, spoiled, furious, then softened, scrambling. It's not what you think, she said, fast, stepping back. Marcus, he's nothing old history. We can fix this. Keep the estate, stay. Fix this. I stood, slow, deliberate, met her gaze, unyielding. Old history, I repeated, calm, cutting. You wrote him, chose him, kept him here, under my roof, My dime? 7 years of me, and you fixed it with him, night after night. Her mouth trembled, tears brimming, but she didn't let them fall, just glared, defiant still. You're cold, she said, voice cracking. You never saw me, never cared, Marcus did. This estate, it's mine, you're nothing without it. Nothing. I nodded, let it sit, then stepped past her, to the window, garden sprawling below. Marcus saw you, I said, quiet, final. Now he can have you, without this. It's done. She froze, breath hitching, then turned, stormed out, door slamming, her steps echoing down the hall. I didn't follow, just stayed, papers in hand, estate silent around me. The claim moved fast, James filed it that day, courts quick with clear proof. By Monday, it was mine, deed shifted, her name erased, 7 years of my work, her betrayal, turning the keys to me. She raged, called lawyers, screamed at staff, but the contract held, ironclad, her own trap sprung. Marcus stayed, worked his roses, avoided my gaze, but I didn't care. He was her loss, not mine. I walked the halls, library, garden, every room, saw it new, not hers, not ours, just mine. Revenge wasn't loud, reserved men don't cheer, but it was deep, a quiet shift she'd feel forever. She'd ruled this place spoiled, sharp, called it her soul, her birthright. Now it was mine, legally, fully, her choice with Marcus the lever I'd pulled. I didn't gloat, didn't need to, just stood in the library, papers filed, her world flipped. 7 years, and she'd lost what she'd clung to, her estate, her pride, while I took it, calm and sure. She'd stay, maybe fight, maybe leave, but it didn't matter. The game was mine, and she'd play it out in a house that answered to me. Celeste's storm quieted after the estate became mine, her rage, her calls to lawyers, fading into a brittle silence that settled over the manor like dust. The deed was signed, Monday's ink dry, her name gone, and I walked its halls alone, a reserved man in a space no longer hers. 7 years of her ruling sharp, spoiled, commanding, ended with Marcus, her gardener, her choice, turning the keys to me. The contract had done its work, her infidelity a lever I'd pulled, calm and sure, stripping her of what she'd prized most. She stayed, holed up in her room, pacing the east wing, while I moved through the library, the garden, the rooms I'd funded, now mine by right. I didn't seek her out, let her stew, let the loss sink deep. The staff knew, whispers in the kitchen, glances in the halls, saw the shift, kept their distance. Marcus stayed too, worked the roses, head down, a ghost I ignored. I didn't need him gone, his part was played, her betrayal his leash now, not mine. The estate felt different, stone walls steady, library shelves mine to keep, its luxury no longer her throne, just a space I'd shape. Shock faded, replaced by the slow burn of her lies, her long game with him. Anger cooled, spent on the claim, the papers that turned her birthright to dust. Sadness lingered, not for her, not fully, but for me, the man who'd trusted, who'd built, who'd missed her drift. Acceptance came then slow, firm, a tide I didn't fight. She found me Wednesday late, past dusk, in the library, my refuge, papers cleared, just a lamp and quiet air. She stood in the doorway, hair loose, eyes hollow, no catalog, no demands, just her, smaller than I'd ever seen. We need to talk, she said, voice low, frayed, stepping in without waiting. I didn't stand, just nodded, leaned back in the chair, watched her approach, hesitant, not sharp, not spoiled now. She stopped by the desk, hands clasped, trembling, looked at me, really looked, for the first time in years. You took it, she said, soft, almost a whisper. The estate, everything, it's yours now. I didn't answer, just let her words hang, let her fill the silence she'd made. I didn't think you'd do this, she went on, voice cracking, eyes down. I didn't think, Marcus, it had cost me this. I'm sorry, truly, I never meant it to end us. Sorry. I shifted, hands flat on the desk, met her gaze, steady, calm. You meant it then. Every step, every note. Her lips trembled, tears brimming, spilling. She shook her head, fast. It wasn't like that, not love, not what you think. He's familiar, from before, someone I could lean on when you weren't there. Weren't there? I nodded, let it sit, watched her scramble, her excuses thin as paper. I was there, I said, quiet, cutting. Every payment, every repair, every night you turned away. You leaned on him, planned him, while I held this place for you. She stepped back, hands twisting, tears falling free now. You were cold, she said, voice rising, breaking. Distant, always papers, always numbers. I needed more. Someone warm, alive. Marcus, he knew me, before you. Yes, but it didn't mean this. Warm. I stood then, slow, deliberate, walked to the window, garden dark below. She followed, close, not touching, her breath shaky. I'm losing everything, she whispered, small. Please, don't end us. Take it back. Let me stay. I turned, faced her, saw the spoiled queen, cracked, pleading, not ruling now. Stay, I repeated, calm, final. You can, rooms are yours, for now, but us, it's gone. You ended it, Marcus ended it, long before I took the deed. Her face crumpled, tears streaming, she reached out, hand hovering, I stepped back, out of reach. I didn't mean to lose you, she said, voice raw. I'll stop him, all of it. Give us, another chance. Another chance. I shook my head, slow, sure, looked past her, to the shelves, the life I'd reclaim. No, I said, simple. You lost me, lost this, when you chose him. It's mine now, my estate, my start. She stood still, silent, tears drying, eyes empty, then turned, walked out, slow. No snap, no fight left. The door clicked shut, soft, final, and I stayed, lamp glowing, estate quiet around me. Celeste's absence grew louder after that last talk, her presence in the estate shrinking, a ghost fading into the walls she'd once ruled. She didn't leave, not right away, just stayed in the east wing, her steps rare, her voice silent, no more orders snapping through the halls. I didn't push, didn't care, let her linger, a shadow of the spoiled queen she'd been. The deed was mine, court's final, her name erased, and I walked its rooms alone, a reserved man who'd lost his wife, his feelings, but gained something vast, something solid. The library stayed my anchor, its shelves steady, its quiet mine, while the garden sprawled below, Marcus still tending roses I'd never prune. I'd taken her world, calm, legal, complete, and she'd felt it, deep and permanent, just as I'd meant her to. Days turned weeks, autumn crept in, leaves falling across the estate's old stones, its luxury now a canvas I'd shape. Staff adjusted, moved quieter, nodded when I passed. No whispers now, just work, their loyalty shifting to the man who held the keys. Celeste tried once, left a note under my door, scribbled fast. I'll go if you want, just say. I read it, set it aside, didn't answer. She could stay, leave, drift, it didn't matter. 7 years taught me her fire, sharp, demanding, but it had burned out, left me cold, and I didn't need its warmth anymore. The estate was mine, hers no longer, and that was the end I'd carved. I started woodworking, simple at first, a bench by the window, tools bought, wood stacked, hands learning curves I'd never traced. Hours passed there, sanding, shaping, quiet work, a rhythm I could hold, a hobby born from loss, but mine alone. The staff watched, nodded when I carried planks through, saw me shift, not the shadow Celeste had cast, but the man who'd claimed it all. Marcus passed once, eyes down, roses in hand, said nothing, just moved on. I didn't care, didn't speak, just kept carving, wood dust settling, estate humming around me. She left a month later, mid-October, no warning, just a car pulling out, her bags gone, east wing empty. A note stayed, I'm done, keep it. Scribbled, sharp, her last cut. I read it, folded it away, didn't chase, didn't call. I didn't feel triumph, not loud, not bright, just quiet, a space opening where she'd been. Woodworking grew, tables now, chairs, hands steady, shaping something new, something I'd keep. What's next was clear, not grand, not wild, just mine. The estate, old, luxurious, stood firm, its library my workshop, its halls my quiet. I'd sell nothing, didn't need to, just live, work, carve. Friends called, asked about her, about us. I shrugged, said it's over, moved on. Work waited, logistics, numbers, a beat I knew, but woodworking held me, a start I'd chosen, a craft to fill the days. The estate stretched around me, stone, garden, silence, a world I'd taken, not by chance, not by force, but by her own step, her own break. 7 years ended, her ruling, me building, and I'd closed it, turned it, made it mine. Wood shavings piled, tools sharp, hands sure, and I saw it. Life, new, carved from what she'd left. How I lost my wife and feelings but became the owner of a huge estate. That's how it was, a tale told, a memory fading, a start begun.